Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ryan Frazier, and I am the Partner Marketing Manager here at SmartRecruiters. With companies of all sizes around the world struggling to fill critical roles, we are excited to have partnered with Gem to bring you today's webinar, How to Attract and Engage Top Talent at Scale. I wanted to start with some quick housekeeping. Today's webinar will be a panel-style conversation where our speakers will be discussing the actionable tips and strategies to help you attract the talent you need, and also share specific tactics to engage talent throughout the entire candidate journey. We'll try to save time at the end for your questions, so please make sure to submit those along the way. And if for some reason we cannot get to those in time, we'll follow up with everybody for any unanswered questions. We will also be sending a recording of this live webinar afterwards to all registered attendees. We do have a lot to cover today, so I'm excited to go ahead and introduce today's speakers. We have Autumn Anderson, the Global Talent Attraction Manager here at SmartRecruiters. We're also joined by Warren Davidson, Client Services Director of SmartRecruiters Attracts, and Viet Nguyen, the Customer Talent Advisor with Gem. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you guys to kick off the conversation.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss a topic that's critically important to every organization. Now more than ever, we know we must be strategic about how we're approaching attracting talent to come work for us. It's going to require commitment, creativity, and engagement in order to compete with other companies. Now, to put this in perspective, in B2C marketing, the number of touches before a prospect converts to a customer can vary, but recent data shows it can take around 8 touch points on average before making a sale. Now, when it comes to potential candidates converting into applicants, the number of touches is even higher. So studies have shown it can take between 12 and 18 touch points with your brand before someone decides to apply to a job at your company. Now, that makes perfect sense because when you consider the decision to apply to and accept a new job, it's much more impactful than making a purchase, usually. Candidates could be uprooting their entire lives to come work for you, so it's often not going to be an impulse decision like many purchases might be after seeing consumer marketing. So by developing a visible and eventually known employer brand, it's going to help candidates find the right fit so they can opt in and ideally remain at your company long term, or they can even opt out right away and improve the experience for everyone. So today we're going to talk a little bit about demystifying that prospect candidate journey, including the touch points that are going to help them understand your brand, getting them to respond to your outreach, and then ultimately applying to your jobs. So as a reminder, we do have a lot to cover today, so we'll do our best to get to the Q&A. But as Ryan mentioned, whatever questions we don't get to, we will answer via blog post and share it out with you afterwards. So let's get started. Now, whether or not a person has heard of your company, awareness is always going to be an important first step for talent attraction, because even if someone knows of your commercial or product brand, that does not mean that they have considered working for you. They might not even know what opportunities you hire for or have any idea if it's the right move for them. So, Viet, let's start with you. When developing your employer brand in the market, what are some things that people need to consider and where can they get started?
Hi, everyone. I would say the first thing any team needs to consider when thinking about attracting talent is exactly is it you're selling to this talent. It's not just jobs, and you'll find that to be the undertone of this conversation. Attracting talent is so much more than sending job descriptions. But I would say like the very first thing to really, I think, take stock of is what is it you're selling, and that's oftentimes packaged as your employee value proposition or EVP. You hear that term thrown around a lot, but like, what does it actually mean? And so oftentimes your EVP is like things that are unique to your company, the things that you want to tell other people about. Because otherwise, let's say you're a software engineer or a recruiter, when you're like, hey, come take a look at this recruiter job, there's no difference between your recruiter job and the next recruiting job. And so it's really your employee value proposition that's going to make you stand out to be unique in the crowd. And so, developing your EVP is not easy. It's quite a journey. And, for smaller companies, it might be your founder and a few of the early employees who get together and try to figure out like, what is it we're about? Like, what are the words we want to put on the wall one day? And then you have like larger companies that, sometimes you don't really get around to define your EVP till later, and they'll bring consultants to actually come and actually facilitate the design process. And so, but it's an important part, because otherwise you're just out there talking about jobs as opposed to like what value you're actually providing to your future employees. And once you have your EVP, you can then use that messaging. You can use your EVP kind of throughout your messaging, whether it's through outbound sourcing or on your website, whatever it is. But like everything is really grounded in your employee value proposition.
Great, thank you, Viet. So, when it comes to employee value proposition and sharing that message out, typically you're not just going to say, this is our EVP. You're going to want to create some content around that. So I would love to hear from both you and Warren about some specific topics where we can kind of weave the EVP in, but what topics are really important in that discovery and awareness stage for candidates in general, regardless of their industry or their role. What kind of content, if you especially have a limited amount of time, should you really be focusing on to bring that awareness to your employer brand?
Warren, do you want to go first? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, rookie error. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. So what I thought I'd do this afternoon is just share some of the key content types that we see with our customers. So my teams write content for customers day in, day out. So some of the themes that seem to go really, really well, and that is from a traffic generation point of view and from a candidate engagement point of view, are really about telling the story of what it's like to work at your organization. So things like a day in the life, for example, a day in the life of a salesperson, a day in the life of a software engineer, to really give or paint a really strong picture of what it's actually like to work in the organization. Candidate and staff testimonials also work really, really well, as does things like benefits as well. So again, I think one of the stats that I've seen over the last few years is that the more benefits you add to a job ad, for example, the higher conversion rate and the higher applications you get to that job ad. So candidates are absolutely interested in what it's like to work at your organization, benefits. Absolutely, diversity is another big area that goes really, really well from a candidate point of view. More candidates are interested in working in diverse organizations, or what your organization are actually doing about diversity as well. Also for me, just from a kind of talent attraction and digital generation point of view, location can be really important as well. So again, if your business operates in a number of locations or in really, really strong locations, that's something to absolutely shout about. And then again, in the same vein, over the last couple of years, we have seen a really, really high increase in searches for remote and hybrid working as well. So candidates adding the word remote to their job titles have gone through the roof over the last few years for obvious reasons. So how your organizations work from a remote and hybrid point of view can be really, really great for content marketing as well. What else? Yeah, day in life, benefits, remote location. I think those are some of the kind of low-hanging fruit that work really well from a content marketing point of view from my guys.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the head. I think day in life is incredibly valuable. Even when I've looked at career sites, I'm looking for that sort of content because I want to know, can I picture myself at your company? Do I feel like I would belong there? I think some of the undertones that we had talked about when we were preparing for this was like, how can you create and produce authentic content? We've all been sold things, and when you're being sold, right? And so nothing is better than when you talk to a friend who currently works at a company and they tell you like, look, this is like the good and the bad of working at this company, and you get a very real picture of like what's like there. Again, it's authentic. And so like whatever content you put together, whether it's day in life or whatever it is, I think it's important to remember to be really authentic. I find that the best content is the best like kind of medium of like authentic content, in my opinion, is oftentimes video or podcasts or like audio. So like written content, it's overly produced and it's like overly sterile. Whereas with video, you kind of get a better feel for the person. It feels more human. So that's probably what I would say, like as far as content types around like sharing what your company's about.
Yeah, agree. Don't write it all. Yeah, try and do infographics, videos, all that kind of stuff as well. And I think also one of the easy tricks that we do that the guys on the call today can do is also just ask questions of your employees. Just give them 5 questions to answer. Again, it's user generated content. It's way more authentic than writing a corporate blog. So try and involve your employees as much as you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because we know that people trust people and not brands as much. And the great thing about employee generated content is that something you can start doing yourself today, typically for free, by setting up a simple form, doing some Q&As with your employees and getting started that way. So I think, content creation is a really great way to start building your brand awareness as an employer, because you're answering candidate questions, kind of showcasing what it might be like to work there. But when you get started on this content creation journey, what are some of the key factors to keep in mind? Viet, we'll start with you and then we can pass it over to Warren.
Yeah. I think if you talk to any sort of marketer, like one thing they'll throw out there is like, okay, well, what segments are you trying to attract, or what are the different populations you're trying to attract? And oftentimes you can boil those populations into personas. And so personas are, I think when people think personas, they think of like role types. So like engineer, salesperson, and so on and so forth. But that's like tip of the iceberg. I think it's important to think about other personas, such as, people who are early career, or people who are late career, or people of color, or whatever it is, right? Like think about like what personas are you trying to attract? And then once you have a clear understanding of what those personas are, define those personas and kind of what their motivation schemas are. And then from there, like building content that would attract or that would be interesting to those personas. And so it comes down to actually having a meaningful or clear content strategy. And there's so much that we borrow from sales and marketing in the recruiting world. And there's just another piece that I think that will, as we become more sophisticated as an industry within recruiting, we'll start to touch on some of the more sophisticated things that marketing does with like content and such. So personas are incredibly important, and I'll probably talk about it a bit more later too around like how you might engage these personas. But I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, and from my perspective, again, I think one of the things that we advise our clients around is how do you come up with a content strategy? How often do I do it? What does it contain? And I think one of the big important things or important points to get across here is that it's not a short-term quick fix. It's something that you should be doing constantly all the time, and that's certainly going to be a theme for today. I think talent attraction, digital, direct sourcing, it doesn't ever stop, right? You're going to have peaks and troughs of candidates, or requirements, but it should never stop. So again, in terms of content generation, it should really be somewhere in the region of 4 to 8 pieces of content a month. And then of course, planning that out quarterly in advance is really important as well. And one of the kind of very, very simple tips that I can give the guys is that at the end of every interview, when you're interviewing new candidates, you often ask them, you got any questions for us? Okay. And usually they are around some of the stuff we've just covered there, like benefits, what it's like to work here, what's the culture. So all those questions that candidates ask at the end of interviews, those can all be blogs or videos or infographics, right? So there is a ton of different sources where you can kind of start to generate a content strategy. And that's both from prospective candidates and also internal employees as well. But again, the important point there is it should never stop. You should be doing it all the time.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. I think, if you've never started creating a content strategy before, or you might have a really small team or even one person dedicated, I think sometimes there's a question about, what do we write about? And to me, I think there's a plethora of information that you can share. And I love the idea of taking interview questions and turning those into external posts, things that people are searching in Google, and hopefully your name comes up and then they have their answers already. So a lot of the times it doesn't mean coming up with something from scratch. It's just tapping into the things that you're already doing internally and figuring out how to communicate that well externally.
And the questions in Google piece is a really important one as well. We try and answer questions that our candidates are putting into Google, and there are loads of different tools out there that you can use to find that information as well. And in the same vein, it's also really important to try and avoid writing headlines, okay? So don't write your blogs as if they were headlines. You want to answer actual questions that candidates are typing into Google or that they are asking you in job interviews, right? But we're trying to we're not trying to enhance the company's brand. Obviously, we are trying to enhance the company's employment. It's not a PR job, though. Okay, we are trying to engage with candidates, and that's an area where companies can often fall down. They kind of cut and paste the corporate content onto the careers website. It doesn't really do the job that it should do.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really about personalization to a person who wants to work there versus somebody who might want to buy your product.
Absolutely.
So I think that, once we have a strategy in place, an EVP, some persona, some content being created, we start thinking about moving prospects from the awareness stage into actually engaging with your brand. So when you get to that point, of course, we'll want to consider all of the possible touch points in their journey so that you are able to meet candidates where they're at. Now, this is a very different approach than direct sourcing or just blasting candidates with emails or in-mails, something that requires them to respond or take action. Instead, this is going to allow them to self-select in at the exact moment they're ready. So thinking back to the intro we did here, 12 to 18 potential touch points with your brand before converting. So there are a lot of different opportunities to get in front of them. So let's go back to some questions here. When we think about those critical touch points that we want to have in place for candidates, what are some of the areas that you think are the most important when showcasing yourself as an employer? We'll start with Warren.
Yeah, so for me, and again, this kind of plays to a little bit what Viet was talking about earlier. We rob a lot from sales and marketing here, right? So we've got to look at our digital talent attraction, direct sourcing as a kind of a funnel, okay? So it starts with our digital advertising, which might be Google, might be social, might be search marketing, whatever. But again, moving those candidates down that funnel onto something like a proper careers website is really, really important. So where are you going to direct those people, whether they're coming from social, from Google, from adverts? And really important that careers site is kind of contained with all the right rich content, and it's maintained regularly. So again, it comes back to my point earlier of it never goes out of date, it never stops evolving, it never stops moving, okay? So again, you've kind of got the funnel being your messages out to the market from your EVP via advertising, Google, social, whatever. You funnel those candidates into a rich content, well-built, well-proportioned careers website. And then again, what are the main elements of that site? We've kind of touched on a few of them already, but the blog and the careers content section is really, really important. Again, it's got to be separate from the main corporate website. You are, of course, targeting a completely different audience from a targeting point of view. Actual customers versus employees is completely different. So you need a separate marketing machine to be able to operate there. Again, specifically targeted at your potential candidates from job title, seniority, location point of view. Another kind of really important bread and butter piece of that digital matrix is landing pages as well. So again, for most career sites, they'll have landing pages, or they should have landing pages for different job titles and different locations, okay? And again, what is landing page? What is important about a landing page? So again, a landing page should contain the job title or the location in the URL. It should also contain it in the H1 or the header of the site itself. Again, I've got a lot of the good landing pages will have some text at the top, and then they'll have jobs below that. So again, jobs that relate to the job title location you're talking about, and then a good call to action, because again, not every candidate that hits that page is going to be ready to apply. So that's where things like a CRM can come in, okay? So not really a simple message such as not ready to apply now, click here and join our talent community or join our community can be an easy way to start engaging with candidates before they're ready to apply. So again, and landing pages serve kind of 2 or 3 different purposes here. They are great for candidate engagement, okay? So we're giving candidates a relevant experience when they hit the website. They're also great for SEO. Again, the more landing pages that you have with the correct job titles in, the more chances you have ranking in Google. And they're also good for things like Google PPC, because if you are driving traffic from Google PPC ads to a landing page that's relevant, and by that I mean you've got the job title in the advert, job title in the page title, and you've got content around that job area in the page itself, then it's all relevancy, it's all tied together. Google loves relevancy. You'll get a better quality score for your adverts and you'll pay less. Okay, so again, those landing pages are real bread and butter. And it's also, landing pages are a way that talent attraction teams can respond to the business quite quickly as well. So if your CEO comes to you and says, we need candidates in a particular area or location, well, one thing you can do immediately is create a landing page, okay, and start generating candidates straight away. So I think, that funnel is really advertising, career site, blogs, and landing pages. Those are 4 areas that we can absolutely optimize from a candidate generation perspective.
Warren, I feel like you could write a book on the topic.
I could talk about it for quite a long time, I must confess.
It's funny. I remember when Google Jobs first came out, and everyone was like, how do I get my jobs on Google Jobs? And now it's like, now there's actual science behind it. And it's still something that I don't particularly understand a lot about. And so I feel like I just learned a lot just now. So thank you. And so as far as, some other places, I think you want to meet your candidates is on social, right? Like, I think depending on the sort of candidates you're going after, or personas you're going after, there are going to be different social sites that make sense. For recruiters, you probably want to be on LinkedIn. For salespeople, you probably want to be on LinkedIn. For engineers, you may want to be on, like, have a presence on GitHub, Stack Overflow, Reddit, etc. Right. And so I think understanding, and now, like, I think there are even bigger communities on Slack, Discord, and so on and so forth, which is, like, by the way, like, social, like, people think like, oh, social is, it doesn't really matter because how many hires does it actually generate? And I think that's the problem when people think about employer brand, and they're like, well, like, tell me about how many conversions we've had from to hire. It's like, it's not about hires, it's about building your brand awareness. Oh, I was just like nodding. She's like, yep, that's my job. I feel like employer brand folks at companies, they have a tough job in that I think they're constantly having to evangelize their own jobs at the company. Like, this is like what we're about. This is how we should be measured. And I think probably one thing that Warren kind of touched on, but maybe not explicitly, which is like, how do you set up Google Analytics on your career site, and like understanding like what conversion there is, what conversions are actually going from the website to your jobs page, and so on and so forth. But actually, somebody on our team at Gem said something, someone way smarter than me said this to me, which I found to be very fascinating, which is you have to take control of your employer brand. So you get to pick like what people think about your company. And if you don't take charge of that brand, people will come up with their own ideas what your brand is. And so as much as you can to put things out on social of like who you're about, day in the life, all the content you're actually putting on your career site, how do you kind of put it in, like, how do you place that content where your target demographic is to actually get them back to your website? The idea is always to redirect back to your website. That's where all like the rich content is that's constantly being updated, as Warren mentioned. It's just a kind of a gateway back to your website. So there's that. I would say there are sites like, Glassdoor, comparably. People also wonder, like, how valuable is Glassdoor and comparably in some of these other sort of review sites. The short answer is, or at least in my opinion, Glassdoor is incredibly important, even though, like, and it's kind of I like Glassdoor because it's not a pay to play sort of situation where it's like, yes, you can pay Glassdoor to have kind of more features, but at the end of the day, responding to Glassdoor reviews, etc., like, I don't think that costs anything. And so, and I think there's some stat out there that like 95% of people who take jobs, they always go to Glassdoor first to read about the company. And so if you aren't don't have a presence on Glassdoor or comparably, that just leaves question marks in the candidate's mind. And so the last thing you want to do is like leave this gap of information that then someone else can have to fill themselves. And so I would say like Glassdoor is incredibly important to kind of have a presence on. And again, there are also other places like Reddit and so on and so forth, which are, and it's like going back to my original point, it's like, it's important to be authentic. If you're in these communities, like where you're just like sending out jobs, like people are quickly going to recognize that, oh, Autumn is only sending Smart Recruiter jobs in this Discord channel or in this Discord server. I'm not going to engage here, or you start to like block it out mentally. And so, yeah. So all that to say is like, you want to be where your audience is, share authentic content, and take control of the narrative.
Yeah, I think that's all such great points. From an employer brand perspective, absolutely. I've seen the same thing you have where, your employer brand exists in the market with or without you. So if you're leaving it to everyone else, then you don't get a say. So no matter what, people are talking about your company, hopefully, but hopefully it's good. And if you're not out there sharing your culture, your stories, your EVP, then it's left to what other people are saying, opinions, and you don't really have any input. So it's really important, again, to take advantage of some of these free tools. And just remembering, again, it's not about getting people to apply. It's one of those many touch points where they really start to understand who you are as an employer. And think about yourself considering a job. What are some of the things that you want to understand? If you've never heard of a company before, or you don't know much about them as an employer, how likely are you to just click on a random job that you see on LinkedIn? Probably not. But if you know someone who works there, you might reach out for referrals. You'll probably check Glassdoor. And then hopefully, if you have enough interest, it seems good, then maybe you'll head back to their career site. So I do want to talk a little bit more about career sites, because that is a property that you own and you have complete control over, versus something like a social site, which could go away at any point. So when building out a career site, there's a lot of different things to keep in mind. So I'm going to bring this to you, Warren, and I would love to hear from you. What functionality is out there now, or what should employers be looking for in a career site to create the best candidate experience and provide the most value?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about, there's a couple of areas that we can talk about here. Structure, user experience, visibility, and the types of candidates that you're attracting, probably the four main areas. Okay, so we start with structure. I always look at a careers site as kind of a three-legged stool. Okay, so, and the three-legged stool is propped up by jobs, content, and your recruiters. Okay, those are the three things that you need for a good careers website, and for a careers website that will rank in Google. So from a jobs point of view, again, what's really important is how those jobs are marketed as well. It's no good having a career site obviously that no one sees, right? So most career sites will have the traditional job alerts, but again, as Viet mentioned earlier, you've got to make sure that a career site's jobs get indexed by Google, by Google for Jobs and Google very, very quickly. And again, a lot of career sites these days will also have things like browser push notifications. So again, a candidate lands on a job and they can just click a button to get similar jobs flagged to them within a browser. So jobs and how they're marketed, really important. Same with content marketing. We've covered content a lot today, but most new career sites will automatically market that content out to candidates. So you publish 4 blogs a month, it gets sent out automatically as an email shot. Okay, so again, you want a career site to do as much of the hard work as possible. And the important thing about the recruiter profiles is twofold. It's first of all candidate conversion rates, but also it's kind of putting a face to the name. As you say, people engage with people. And we've seen from heat maps on career sites that you get equally as many clicks on apply for a job as you do contact the recruiter. And again, that's really important from a passive versus active candidate point of view as well. Not everyone's ready to apply now, but they might want to have a conversation with you. And the other important thing about those recruiter profiles is that they should, theoretically, if your name is tied to your company, organization, brand, they should outrank your LinkedIn profile as well. So if someone is doing a search for Autumn because you've interviewed them, then your profile on the SmartRecruiters career site, fingers crossed, will come up before a LinkedIn profile. Okay, so again, that's all really, really important stuff. The other piece then is user experience. Okay, so once you've got the fundamentals and structure of your career site, that three-legged stool sorted, then it's about improving the candidate experience and improving relevancy. So one of the kind of new and emerging trends in career sites is intelligent career sites. And those are career sites that behave a bit more like Amazon and Spotify. So they personalize the content that's presented to candidates based on location and previous experience. So when a candidate first hits a career site, theoretically, you should know where they are, okay? So you can then present them with relevant jobs and relevant content. But as they move around the site, they're going to search for engineering jobs or marketing jobs or whatever. And at that point, you know what they're interested in. So when they come back to the homepage in a month's time or a week's time, that homepage should be populated with jobs that they're interested in, content they're interested in. It should have different call to actions. And again, we're behaving a bit more like Amazon and Spotify, and we are absolutely using some of that online retail world for the benefit of talent attraction marketing, okay? So again, we just want to think about intelligent career sites in the future rather than just a one size fits all, hope for the best kind of approach, okay? And then the third piece is visibility, okay? So why is Google visibility important? Because 80% of job searches start with a Google search, okay? So you want to be trying and getting some of those candidates early in their job searching process. And also, of all the career sites that we have built for customers, probably 50 to 60% of traffic lands on a job or a landing page or a blog. So they don't even see your beautifully designed homepage because they are doing a Google search and finding your different parts of your site. So again, ensuring you've got a proper SEO strategy in place is also really, really important. And why is Google important? Relevancy breeds higher quality candidates, okay? If all your traffic comes from Indeed, I guarantee you won't be getting the best quality candidates, okay? So you've got to vary your sources of candidates as well. So user experience, visibility, career site fundamentals and structure, and then finally, the different types of candidates, okay? So every client I've ever worked with, you've got the types of candidates that you find easy to recruit and the types of candidates that are difficult to recruit. And then, of course, overlaid on top of that, you've got passive and active candidates. So those that are looking for a job now and those that are just tiptoeing at the moment. So again, we need to treat those kind of four audiences a little bit differently. So I'll give you a quick example. So Vodafone here in the UK, big mobile phone company, they don't struggle for people to work in their shops, in their retail environment, okay? They're probably top 10 brand in the UK, so they don't suffer from brand awareness. So getting people to sell mobile phones, not very difficult. However, finding developers, really, really hard because it's a much, much smaller candidate pool and everyone's after them. It's so competitive. So the career site has to behave in a different way. So for a candidate that you are struggling to source, don't make the application process hard, okay? They should hit the landing page and they should get a little pop-up that says, are you a developer? Yes, then phone this number. So it's really, really easy. Whereas if you're getting thousands and thousands of applications, you might want to put in a few more barriers, okay? So again, you can't really have the same application process for every single candidate because, of course, they're all different. And I'm sure everyone on the call will have those similar problems.
I think that's such a great point, Warren. I mean, as things continue to evolve, and I think everyone is probably just overloaded with the amount of information they receive on Google, on social, through email, that the more customization and personalization that's there, the more likely you are going to get someone to either click to your website or click through your website. You know, if I land on a career site and it's all about developers, and I have to dig around a little bit too far to find out what it would be like for me working in employment brand, it's going to be a lot easier to X out and do another search or go to another company. So I really think that that is critical. And I love how you differentiated not just between active and passive, but also, you know, hard to fill, easy to fill. And then taking it even further, you know, some of the larger companies, maybe organizations on this call, depending on the number of types of roles that you're hiring for, you can get even more customized. So, you know, maybe smaller companies mostly have sales, marketing, engineering, but, you know, other companies might have up to 100 different types of jobs that they hire for. And again, if everything you're posting about or everything they see is just one specific type of job, and they don't really know you that well, they might think you have nothing for them. So making it easy, I think, is super critical, especially with those hard to fill jobs like software engineers and developers.
Yeah, and I think just one quick thing to add there is also having a great careers site and having great personalization and authentic content all that stuff's going to enhance your employer brand as well. Okay, so yes, the employer brand and the values and the messaging is all really, really critical, but all that content and that career site piece really brings it to life. So you've got to evidence that on your career site.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of questions about that, because I think this is an area, a lot of people might focus on social or other things, but again, the career site is something that you own. And I think this is something that more companies need to pay attention to. So just as a quick reminder, if you do have a question, make sure that you're putting it in the chat, and hopefully we'll have a little time here at the end to answer some of those live. So just thinking about some of the stuff that Viet and Warren have shared so far, kind of think about what questions you might have, or if you were to take this back to your organization, your teams, what questions might they have? And we'll definitely try to get to those now, if not after the webinar. So I think the next kind of thing we want to focus on is, let's say we've gotten everything in place, everything we've talked about to this point, and we have all of these amazing candidates coming to our career site. That doesn't always mean that you have the exact job that is the best fit for them right now, or that they're totally ready to apply. So once we've gotten all these candidates coming to our career site, they're engaged, they're clicking our content, what would you recommend doing in order to kind of keep these candidates warm and engaged, and making sure that you're building that pipeline for when you need them?
Oh man, how much time do we have? Working at Gem, I can talk about this topic for a very long time. I'll try to keep it like the most important things, but if anyone has questions, feel free to throw in chat or find me on LinkedIn afterwards. Always happy to kind of talk shop about CRM and kind of how to nurture talent and so on and so forth. But I think actually really quick before I jump into that, something that Warren said that we may want to dovetail off of, which is, once you have all these applicants, for let's say Vodafone, and they have all these applicants for their retail stores, how do they get to like most qualified candidates first? Like that's like the next problem you have, is like you have now this massive pool of candidates, and what experience do you want to give like these folks who apply, that do they get a call back? Do they get an email back? Do they get anything back? But that's like, I think something that's really important to consider when thinking about your career site, because if you do everything correctly, the idea is that you'll have a plethora of candidates, but then now you have to figure out what to do with them. And so that kind of touches kind of on what you had asked, Autumn. It's like, now you have all these candidates and there may or may not be the right job for them today. What do you do? So I think the short answer is like, you need to nurture these prospects to eventually convert them into candidates. Like that's the goal, right? So how do you do that? I think most people will say, buy a CRM and you'll be all set. But in reality, tools and technology are only as good as the effort you put into setting it up. And I don't just mean like the technical setup. You really want to think about your CRM similar to how you think about your ATS. Like we have like full recruiting operations teams that manage the ATS, and you create these like really in-depth documentation around standard operating procedures and all these things. But CRM is somehow treated differently. It's just, let's just buy it and plug it in and hope that people know how to use it. A lot of companies do it and they end up creating actually more of a mess, and then the CRM becomes unusable. It creates a bad taste in recruiters' mouths of like, why am I doing this work that it can't even use it? And so all that to say, like, if you're going to buy a CRM, invest in it. It's an actual investment. And so how do you like maintain it? Let's say you have all these applicants coming in and you're like, all right, well, first you need to like actually put them into like proper segments. And so like, okay, this is my talent pool for engineers. This is my talent pool for data scientists. And then you start to segment even deeper of like, okay, within this engineering talent pool, here are people in different locations, here are different levels. And those are all like, you have to decide like what taxonomies you want to use to actually organize your CRM. And so yeah, there's a ton of things to think about when it comes to organizing your CRM. One thing I will say that Gem does that I find to be particularly cool is Gem refreshes your CRM so that you always have up-to-date information on your prospects. So for example, today, if you were to put me in your CRM, I work at Gem, and say Viet Nguyen works at Gem as a customer talent advisor. 2 years from now, I decide to leave and go to SmartRecruiters to be, I don't know, in product marketing. Gem will actually refresh me in your instance, where it'll change my job title when I do move jobs, so that when you go and source me, I'm not going to come up in your customer talent advisory query. I'm going to come up in your product marketing query. And so you're never going to put your foot in your mouth saying, hey, I don't know how things are going at company, using that token, and it plugs in the wrong company. That is, I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and it's a little embarrassing, but it kind of comes with being a recruiter, I suppose. And so I think maintaining it, like finding the right tools that will like make manual work easier. Like no one wants to go and update profiles. Like no one wants that job. And so finding technology that will kind of take a lot of that manual kind of work and automate it for you is really helpful. Other things, I kind of mentioned a little bit about standard operating procedures. So, as candidates flow from your career site into your ATS and then into your CRM, like what does that journey map look like, and actually designing it to like be really clear so that actually everyone knows how to operate within those systems, and being really intentional, I think, is like probably the underlying undertone here, is that everything you do with your CRM or your ATS or really any system, you should be intentional about it, especially if you're going to make this big investment that's like $100,000 worth or whatever it is. I think probably the last piece I'll call out is making sure there's actually someone who is accountable for maintaining it. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you have like the bystander effect. It's like, well, it's everyone's responsibility and therefore it's no one's responsibility. We see that a lot at Gem. And so, during the onboarding process, when we onboard customers onto our product, onto our platform, we kind of lay out here are all like the traps that people previous to you have stepped into. Let's help you like not like circumvent these traps and make sure you set up your CRM correctly from the get-go. But it's a lot of work. And I recognize, like everything I'm saying, like, how does anyone have time for this on top of their job? Well, like anything, whether it be employer brand, diversity, if you care about it, you need to invest in it. And that's just both technology, people, all those things. And so, but if you do it correctly, like if you're smart recruiters and you hire on autumn, like it will eventually pay dividends in the long run. And so it's important to, like, I think, keep in mind that the things that we're talking about, they're not short-term fixes. Like if you're trying to reduce your reliance on agencies or things you don't have control over, you have to kind of make the investment, and it takes time for that investment to actually like kind of grow legs and kind of grow on its own. And so so that all said, now that you have your CRM, okay, what do you do? And it goes back to kind of what we talked about previously, which is how do you think about a nurture strategy? How do you think about like what content do you share with these with your kind of talent pools, and kind of what cadence? And that's where like you have an employer brand person to like help you think through these things. But these are all aspects that I would hope that a TA leader would be thinking about before they buy a CRM, knowing like, hey, it's not just buying the technology, you're buying like you're buying this technology to stand up your strategy, which is omni-channel, multifaceted, like whatever phrase you want to use. Like it's a lot, but this is how you get there. So I know I like scratch the surface on a lot of things, and I try to be specific, but it's hard to kind of, I think, get really into the weeds here without like spending 2 hours talking about it. So if folks have questions or anything like that, feel free to put in chat, or like, again, DM me afterwards.
Yeah, that's great. I think everything that we've talked about today is really, really valuable. And I think one of the big key takeaways is that your brand exists with or without you. So it does require time and commitment to make sure that you are having a voice in your own brand. So I know, as Viet said, a lot of the things we discussed today, we were just scratching the surface of. There's so much information that we could go into on career sites, CRM, content strategy. So please shoot any questions into the chat. But a couple of things before we start to wrap up. Again, if you do all the things that we just spoke about and you do them well, theoretically, again, you're building that really highly engaged, diverse, qualified pipeline of candidates. Over time, candidates will be more likely to apply to your job or even just sign up for job alerts if you've already begun building that relationship with them and they know they want to work for your brand. So especially with specific types of roles, people are less likely to just apply blindly. They really want to know the type of culture, what they're getting, what projects they're going to work on, who they're going to work with. So really keep these things in mind as you get started on this journey or pick up wherever you may currently be at. So before I pass it back to Ryan for Q&A, I am going to have him build or bring up one of the slides that we did want to share as part of this conversation. So I know that we've heard a lot of great suggestions today, but in order to make them really actionable, we wanted to give a few key takeaways that you can take back to your teams and to leadership. So first, boosting the visibility of your employer brand will increase candidate interest on an ongoing basis. So start by thinking about your EVP, your employee value proposition, or what is it that you're offering to your employees, and how can you authentically share that with candidates so they understand that they might want to work for you. Thinking about who those target audiences are, what are their personas, and it's not just specific job titles, it's more about the person as a whole. And then you can really start to create content around the topics that those candidates might be curious about and that they might be typing into Google. This can be broad questions or really specific to the type of job, the type of work. And then two other points to share with you, just so you can take these away. Again, we're focused on building long-lasting relationships that lead to high quality, diverse pipelines. So to do this, you really want to meet candidates where they're at. So you're sharing content on various platforms like social media, review sites, but you're ultimately driving them back to your career site. So you have that rich content, and then you can start to nurture them through CRM campaigns that is already integrated with your site. And then you'll be ready for any future talent shortages or high need positions as you have that intelligent site integrated with CRM, and you can continue to build that relationship throughout time. So it's not quick hit, one and done. It's a longer term process. Keep thinking about those 12 to 18 touch points and know that not everything you do will convert to an application, but if you stick with it over time, that will ultimately help your bottom line. So that said, I think Ryan has pulled some questions if we have any. I think we have just a couple minutes left. Ryan, I will ask you if we have anything in here. I'm taking a look as well.
Actually, Autumn, as you're taking a look, one thing that I forgot to mention as I was thinking about CRM is like buy a system that integrates with kind of what you're currently doing. It's recruiters do not need another system to have to figure out how to use and how to learn. And so as much as you can, buying a CRM that then plugs into like nicely into your career site, your ATS, and plugs into kind of like your or is your sourcing kind of platform like Gem. I know this sounds like obviously plugging Gem, but you can source in Gem and that naturally becomes your CRM. So there's no kind of having to move people from one to another. And so like really think about what is it you're trying to achieve through CRM? And then like, what are like the 4 most important things, and go find something that nails those 4 things really well. Cause everything else is like nice to have, right?
Yep.
If you don't need, I don't know, if you don't need text messaging as part of your CRM, then maybe like don't consider put that as part of your RFP. I don't know. Like there's a number of things, but I think having a clear idea like what criteria you're using to evaluate, and then go out there and do your RFPs and such, and find the one that works for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point for any piece of technology. I know that not everyone on this call is going to immediately go out and replace their career site or CRM if they already have one. So think about what you already have and then what you actually need, because I know a lot of the platforms out there have tons and tons of functionality, but really focus on starting somewhere and starting with what your priorities are and what you would need to do first. So we do have one question here. What are the best things to highlight about your company to candidates when you're reaching out in a message? So this seems more like, email or a LinkedIn email, something like that.
Yeah, I can take this one. I did a lot of sourcing in my career, and then now help kind of all of Gem's customers like how to source more effectively. I would say like the content that's best shared in like outreach messaging is authentic content. share content that they can't necessarily find easily on a website. So like I like to share like employee stories actually. So like, for example, like, so when you do outreach, first and foremost, send more than one message, like actually set up an actual campaign to reach out. Because I think I definitely have some stats on this where people are more like this respond to your second, third, or fourth message than your first. And then actually thinking about how do I think about four distinctly different messages with different content to actually help them develop like an understanding of like your company from four different sides, as opposed to just like the same message four times. And so it's more so for the content. So one, I really like sharing like employee stories. So like we have a running doc where all of our engineers, when they first join, they'll write like why I joined Gem. And it's just like, that's just a running doc that we have. Then our sourcing team actually uses that when they reach out to engineers. So that's like one. Two is I'll talk about like kind of any active projects that we can talk about. Like, hey, like if you come work here, this is like something that our team is currently working on today. That's a second. Third is I like to share benefits, but not like the standard benefits. Like a lot of times people talk about, health, dental, vision. This sounds a bit, I feel very privileged to say like that's like kind of normal in tech. But sharing things like we have a $1,200 L&D stipend every year. We have I just came back from parental leave, and so I get 4-day work weeks for the first 8 weeks coming back. And so like little like benefits like that actually are that make working at a company special. Like those are like really focused on the unique things that other companies may not have. And then the last thing is using hyperlinks. Probably like I think linking out to like articles or whatever it is. I think that stuff we find that it's funny. There's a very clear correlation of like candidates who respond positively and how many times they click on like links. And so if you see like someone clicking on links a bunch of times, you should probably send them a follow-up message because they're clearly interested. So find a CRM that can help you track these things and so on and so forth. But hopefully that content list helps.
Thank you so much, Viet. That's such a great point, utilizing what your technology can do to really make sure you're tracking all these different data points. Because if we know someone's opening an email from us and then we don't take any action, I think that's a huge missed opportunity. So thank you for that. So we are at the end of time here. So I'm going to pass it back to Ryan just for a quick wrap up. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And as Viet mentioned, if you have questions, you can certainly reach out to myself as well on LinkedIn. Happy to connect and have a conversation.
Cool. All right. Well, again, thank you guys for the great conversation. I wanted to apologize to all of our attendees today for the delay in the start, a little technical difficulties, but I'm glad we're able to get going in the end. I will be sending around the recording of today's conversation so everyone will be able to revisit this great content. And again, just thank you for joining today's conversation, and please reach out to us if you have any questions. Thanks, everybody.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.